It's the Search Engine Journal Show with your host, Brent Csutoras. And here's your host.
Hello, everyone, and welcome, obviously, to the Search Engine Journal Show. I'm Brent Csutoras. I'm joined today by a very special guest, Dr. Michelle Zhou, who's the co-founder and CEO of Juji, Inc., as well as being the inventor of IBM Watson Personality Insights, which I think most of us will agree is something we've heard of, historically. And I'm very, very, very excited to have you on the show and talk with you today. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Brent, for the invitation. It's just an honor to be the show. And I'd love to talk to you the topics you're interested in.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I want to dive into is because, as I mentioned, we have, a little bit of an understanding of IBM Watson, but I don't know how much of our audience really fully understands how important that was to the progression of AI and what exactly it was. So can I ask if you can just briefly, we don't have to go too far into it, but I'd love to know, what is Watson and how did you become a part of the project and what did you specifically do on the project?
So Watson actually started with a very focused project. I think many Americans, probably most Americans, have watched the show called Jeopardy, right? It's a game show, Jeopardy, almost like on every day. So Watson created to actually create an AI system that can beat the human Jeopardy champions. So that's our idea, right? So basically, it's a question and answering. Think about this, really ton of the questions. And Watson was built to answer. So then the project that we started to, at the beginning of the project, so it starts to actually expand to cover many aspects of the AI we call cognitive computing, which means to give AI, computers, more human intelligence. So the project I worked on called, now it's called IBM Watson Personality Insights. The idea is if we can actually take someone's communication text, let's say your emails, your Twitter tweets, your Facebook posts, then the computer can automatically analyze the text to infer your unique characteristics. For example, your values, your psychological needs, or maybe your personality traits. So that's the project actually I started and then became actually the product called IBM Watson Personality Insights.
That's really interesting. I mean, and to give, some background kind of on some of the aspects of being able to do that. So other people might, if you didn't, know that already, you might know that Facebook also did a really big study where they were able to calculate how accurately they could determine what you would like to see and how you would feel about it. And they basically went through a whole grid where they were like, after, 50 likes, we can, we know you like a colleague. After 100, we know you like a friend. After, and it was like after 300, we know you better than your spouse, right? And it was really actually quite accurate. So there is a lot of, different work being done to determine personality insights. And so where do you see the most use of that in today? If you were thinking the personality insights, where is that used at today that people might recognize? Like you made the example with Jeopardy earlier.
Right. So, Brent, you mentioned that actually many of your audiences are marketers, right?
Yes.
Who are also small business owners. So those kind of, we call the deep understanding of each individual. These insights, personality insights, can really be used for offer many types of personalized engagement and personalized services. So, for example, when you actually ask the question to say, tell me more about Charles Darwin. Yes. And you could have a very standard answer, right? But if different people have different personalities or different interests, you could actually phrase the answer in many different types of ways to personalize that answer to each individual. So that's the personality insights can really be used. So for example, in our current work, if the conversational agent can really understand a user's personality, it can offer some very personalized guidance. If somebody who is very ambitious and really wants to impress other people, and the conversational agent, AI assistant in this case, might say this one, I know that you are very ambitious, you want to achieve more. But sometimes stick to the facts really can help you go further away, can go far away, right? And similarly, opposite, if the AI finds a person who is very careful, thoughtful, and always afraid to make decisions or speak up, it can actually encourage that person to speak up more, to basically be more decisive. So you can see that once you knew more kind of about the person, more deeper insights about the individual, the computers can help more, can give more personalized guidance or advice.
One of the things that I definitely want to dive into with this conversation next is kind of like the implementation of that today is a lot through chatbots, right? I mean, we see a lot of people first trying to implement this, kind of bridge the gap kind of solution. I think the idea at some point is there would be more of an entity, some sort of AI entity that would, participate more. But I wonder if you've seen anybody, you talk about like small businesses from a website standpoint being able to do that, but is there any implementation outside of chatbots today for that? I mean, it makes me wonder, like, could we start seeing websites? We already show people information on a website based on geo-targeting and based on, cookied interest. Could we at some point see websites being rewritten and presented to people, data being presented to people in different ways based on their knowledge graph in a way?
So some of our clients actually working with us on this particular aspect, even though I'm not sure it's on their websites yet. So it's based on the chat, based on the conversation, and then the chatbot can actually deliver personalized information. Just for example, let's say if you go to the book website, and then after the person chats with the chatbot for a certain amount of time, let's say 5 or 10 minutes, the chatbot can really recommend books which are tailored to the person's interests, passion, and even personality interests, right? So that's kind of the work we've been doing right now. And as you mentioned something interesting, because most of the chatbots today, people really, that's why I said that we're trying to avoid the word chatbots, because it sounds to give it a really, how do you say, the bad connotation.
Sure.
Because there's a kind of 3 reasons for that. First one is most of the chatbots are really the bots. They can't chat, right? So they often leave their users a very frustrated experience.
Exactly.
They don't understand anything. It's due to a lack of intelligence. Second part of it is that they're impersonal. It's precisely the topic which you're talking about is they always give one-size-fits-all answer, right? If you go to the book website, the normal chatbot, if you're lucky, actually understands what you're saying. Even they understand in the way they just gave you maybe all the popular books, right? Versus give the one maybe you are interested in the most. And the third part of it is, this is actually very passionate. We are very passionate about it. Is most of the AI, if you really want a very powerful AI solutions, it requires organization to really have what do you call it, AI expertise, a lot of financial resources. So that's why we've been working on this area of what we call the democratizing AI, which means to make a really powerful AI accessible to every business, no matter how small the business it is. So they don't need to hire, let's say, a world-class super AI expert team or hiring top-notch programming experts in order to actually install. So I think gradually in the next, I would say, couple of years, we will see that very powerful chatbots, very powerful AI assistants will be sitting on businesses, including small businesses' website, and perform functions as we just did.
So you mentioned like, and there's a couple points in there I'd like to kind of dive into. I personally think that, it's going to be extremely helpful because I know that for me, like I have a hard time finding TV shows. I watch a TV show and I'm like, I love this TV show. I go and I read a review on 5 other TV shows I should love. And I go and start all 5 and I don't love them. And I'm like, well, what is it about this show that everybody else loved it? And it's just based on people's personal recommendations. And it's so few, like what we can gather from people today. And this is where I think wearable glasses really excited me when Google launched their glasses, was that we literally have millions of micro data, interpretations that we make. And yet so few of them are dispersed to anyone who could receive that, right? We have to take the time to say, oh yeah, I thought the restaurant was good, but we didn't see the fact that, oh, the floors were a little dirty and made me think, and the one person didn't wear a glove. And it's not enough for me to go and make a review that's like, I'm angry, but we lose all of that. Right. And so as we start getting more data in, I'm very interested to see if that can get aggregated into these things. And you mentioned that like chatbots isn't a great term. And I think that unfortunately we've dealt with that a lot, right? When social media came out, it got kind of skewed because everybody was looking at it as a traffic generator for digital marketing and not for actual communities, right? So do you see AI, as, an AI assistant as the term that you're trying to see more branded?
Definitely, because we like this term very much. It is when you're thinking about, doesn't matter chatbots in terms of functions, right? So why would you need a chatbot? So we need a chatbot is really to scale, to automate certain business tasks. This is extremely important for small businesses, right? Because you don't have the resource to hire, let's say, a gazillions of people. And especially if you have the people, you don't want to overwork them, right? So you don't want them to work 24/7 and also talking to maybe hundreds of people at the same time, which were actually humans were incapable of doing. So in this case, it is AI is really as I would call it augmenter, augmenting your workforce, working with your existing workforce to do the job better, to scale your operations. That's why assistant sounds like a very natural name to it. So it's assist your business, assist your existing workforce versus replacing them.
And this is an interesting thing because it really starts to get into, the satisfaction level of it, right? So my problem is like, I don't have a lot of faith in the systems, right? So every time I call a system, if I'm talking or if I'm chatting, I've got to answer a bunch of questions that I don't want to answer because I'm already past that point, right? And there's so many flaws in the system today. I'll give an example. I was just with Comcast and they were gonna bury a line outside because my internet was messing up, right? So they sent an email to me, a message to me that said, we are going to bury this line and this is the information we have. And it's like, there is no fence. I'm like, but I have a fence. They're like, there's no watering system, but I have a watering system. So then it said, if you need to update this information, go ahead. And I click it and it takes me to their chat system with no option to update anything. And then I chat to a tech who comes on. It's like, hey, can I help you? A person. And they're like, yeah, I don't know what you want to do. And I'm like, well, this system doesn't work, right? So I think I mentioned to you in a previous conversation, but we were saying that like, this was really supposed to change the world as far as we knew it, right? 5 years ago, chatbots was going to be just the next thing. Everybody doubled down on it. It was like the same time it was chatbots and voice skills, right? Amazon skills and chatbots and FAQs. And then Google rolled out a lot of the search engine having FAQs and certain type of like quick answers. And so it was all about getting people what they needed faster. But what we found was it really didn't jump as far forward as we thought. And even the rhetoric and kind of excitement around, AI assistants when they're called chatbots, as you mentioned, has kind of been diminished because of the experience. What do you think? And I mean, I make assumptions as to why we didn't go as fast as we wanted to go. But you being on, the inside of this and having access to many other professionals like yourself who are, have those inside conversations, what happened with the excitement, the implementation, and why did it not quite solve that issue? Why did it not quite work? And why is it still kind of at the point where today it barely works and so forth?
I think the biggest issue people maybe didn't realize, either the people who are trying to develop it or people who are using it, adopting it, there is a gap between what the humans want the chatbots to do or AI to do versus what this AI can do, right? So for example, like you actually you just talk about example I love to use. You go to the website, you chat. I mean, this case you chatted with a human, right? But if you chat with a chatbot, often they force the users to go down a fixed path. Like exactly you said it.
Exactly.
And you said that's not my problems. My problems are different. and you can't interrupt that. If you interrupt it, and the chatbot is completely clueless, right?
Sure.
In this case, it's really a lack of intelligence. This is why we call it we basically brand our chatbots with cognitive intelligence. And you know why? What is called cognitive intelligence? Cognitive intelligence in the human world, it is our abilities to understand, to remember, to actually learn. So that's exactly we want to teach our AI assistants those skills. It's a human-like skills. So for example, like you said, just use your example to understand. So now you said they ask you, you have a fence. You said, sorry, I don't have a fence. So as the AI should understand that there's a difference, and it should also then go to a different path to help you, not adapt to a chat flow to you versus force you to adapt
to them. Yeah, exactly.
Second part, to remember. So let's say you go down the path. Now you said that you have no fence, but the next one is still need to ask you, for example, what's the side looks like? It's a very narrow place which people can get in, the repaired worker, or maybe it's a white space that they can drive the trucks, or maybe some of the equipment come in. So they still should remember the flow, what other things haven't been asked, haven't been collected. This is called the memory, right? Which humans have naturally, but many chatbots completely clueless. Once it gets interrupted, they can't come back. They can't complete the tasks. To learn is if it interacts with you, like we're going back to the books with the one information you're talking about. Then I should know, actually Brent is very open-minded, always looking forward to new things. Then I wanted to recommend something to him. He said, I know that you always look forward to new ideas, a new trend. Here's some materials that you might be interested in, right? So that's very different than somebody who is very careful, thoughtful, and might say, oh no, this is the here information for you. I even made a comparison table so you can compare and contrast the different pieces of information. So that's the difference between.
So how does that practically? So when you dive into that, how does that get accomplished? I mean, obviously, I think that most of our listeners can understand data flows, right? You're basically saying, and this is part of the learning process with the existing chatbot solutions out there, is that like, hey, you have 20 questions that people asked that you weren't able to answer, so you fill them in. So you're just entering fields of data and you're trying to chain them together in a way that makes sense. But as we've kind of said, like, even with the best intentions, there's few examples of this really working. And the only time they really work are when there are pretty standard flows. Like if I want to order a pizza, right? Some of the pizza apps do a good job because there's a very structured flow for ordering a pizza. You're just not going to deviate from what options they have for toppings and the size and where you live and processing a payment. But how are you approaching this solution to add more cognitive elements to the AI's interactions?
Very, very interesting question. That's also my favorite question as well. So training AI with cognitive intelligence is to teaching AI human skills, which is very difficult, right? It's a very tall order. That's why we should leave it to professionals like us to do it. So what happened here is you actually touched upon 2 points, which is very interesting. So that's why we wanted to democratize the process so the people who don't have a resource or don't bother want to learning how to teach AI cognitive skills, they can still have a chatbots or AI assistants with this cognitive intelligence. So if you said first one, as any other workflow, let's say pizza parlor, right? So they can actually go there just for example, in our system, they can define the main workflow. So which it is when somebody orders the pizza, you need to ask them what type of a pizza, what the size of a pizza, what toppings, right? And then, but in the meantime, they also need to enable the chatbots or these AI assistants to answer questions. So for example, people might ask, I have a coupon, can I still use it? You have the coupon. My birthday's coming, do you have any birthday perks? If I buy, let's say 5 of them, do you have any discounts, right? That's a people question. So the trick, or maybe you think about the secret, for example, what we're doing here, it is the users or maybe the businesses don't need to worry about how nitty-gritty details to be connected, be threaded together. But they will need to provide the business content. So our AI behind the scene will work together to figure out, oh, now this is the main chat flow, I'm still there. But I have to remember when I got interrupted. But if I got a question, I should go to check on my knowledge base to see how my actually knowledge base will provide the appropriate answers. So actually, almost like precisely you just articulated it. People just can go ahead and define the workflow they want, and they can define the basic FAQs, but then leave the rest to the experts. So which means that in our case, it is we have already trained using ton of the data, using our, we call it actually neurosymbolic approaches to train, pre-train all these AI assistants with those basic, what I call the essential human conversation skills.
And you mentioned this kind of like, and I've heard like a lot of people in the AI space talk about Nick Bostrom. A lot of people have talked about the need for a centralized controlled database, not only for, the ease case, but to avoid people going too far with AI, getting, and so forth. And so a controlled element like that, and where that would also be very interesting and very beneficial to most people, and where this should be a huge adoption thing, is it's very similar to established coding principles that we have today. When you have that, you can attach in an API that's like, here's all of our coupons. And you don't have to even worry about do they expire, because it's connecting to your existing database. And so when people know, hey, this AI system connects through these different connecting points, so I need to have these databases, and I can pull that from my existing systems, then all of the interconnections allow it to really be plugged in and take over in a sense without having a lot of input. So who is this that's doing this right now? I mean, obviously you're interested in this. Is this something that your company is working with or spearheading? And how far along is this, and what are the resistance? Like, I don't think a lot of people really think about this idea of an open AI that everyone can utilize, either for free or at a low cost price to standardize the experience.
So your question actually is a very important, but it's also a big question, right? So there are different parts to it. So at a low level, there are open source software like from a Google, like from a Google, Facebook. So to basically help you to train one part of the AI called the natural language processing.
Sure.
So you can think about it in a conversation. It's not just about natural language processing. It's also about the empathy, the responsive manner, right? So in other case, it is, besides our company, I am not aware of it. People have been standardized that process, and when we call it conversational policies. So you can actually define different types of a conversational policy. For example, I want the conversational agent, in this case AI assistant, to be more persistent on its workflow, versus can be flexibly digress to different type of topics, right? So another top, so there's a low level. So basically, if you think about, if you dissect how the conversation occurs, there are many levels of the skills AI needs. Bottom level, basic natural language processing, many companies are doing that. So many companies actually open source that. We also leverage that as well, right?
Sure.
So then going on top, there are different types of skills. Like, for example, even you understand, like we in our conversation, you might understand everything you said. I may not respond to your questions as you expected, maybe, right? So I may choose another way to respond it, or maybe I choose not to respond it. So this is actually called a next level of conversational skills. We call it a conversational logic. And then that one, we are trying to work very similar to just we discussed, modularize it. So other people can just take different parts, almost like a Lego system, right?
Sure, yeah.
Put them together, so we call it conversational topics. So for example, if you want to create an agent, AI assistant, you said, okay, I want this AI assistant to talk about 3 topics. First one topic is asking users about their roles, their challenges. Then another topic is talking about maybe what's solutions you have found so far. And last one, it is talking about what's your current plan of adopting a new solution. You see, these are different topics.
Sure, yeah.
So they don't need to worry about those topics. This is very similar to just said, underneath their gigantic knowledge base, they all connect to it. So they just need to high level to specify, I want my AI assistant to be capable of speaking this topic, this topic, this topic. Then leave the rest of them to the underlying system to figure out how the topic can be discussed and how the topic can be even, threaded together, because people may jump from a topic to topic, right? Just like
you mentioned like there's a lot of layers, and I'm very interested in the concept of like the scope of what is needed to solve the issue, right? We talked about how, when we talk like this, you can see the facial expressions, you can see, when that changes, right? People start out a conversation a certain way, and then they can progress that conversation. You can start to see cues of frustration, right? So some of the chatbots will identify that, right? Some of the voice assistant, kind of the voice interaction AI can really get that, right? If you start using, I know some companies, if you use cuss words, they'll go to a representative quicker. Or if but you could start to notice like a chat has a certain flow and then it gets shorter. Like people stop saying, well, I don't really want that. And they start saying, no, 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 and it's like, okay, they're getting frustrated, right? So there's visual, there's tone, and there's change in pattern. How much of that is required for us to get to the point? Because ultimately we're still trying to get to a point where we feel like we're getting a human's engagement without a human. How much of that is going to be required for us to truly solve this problem completely? Do we need all of it, or do you think we'll be able to get it through text only at some point?
It really depends on your task, right? So it's almost like think about a company when they hire a person. It really depends on the job role, right? If you want this person to be a CEO of the company versus you want this person to be the salesperson of the company, they have very different roles. They have different skills. So it's very similar to what you are talking about, the task of the AI assistant, what their roles are. So if their role is to serve as, let's say, product marketing assistant, right? Just actually try to understand the users or customers' needs and wants, and elicit the information and provide the product information as in return. And then currently, I think the technology are pretty much capable for actually supporting such scenarios. But if you have you watched a movie called Her? It's a movie.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Right. So if you wanted to create somebody like AI assistant like Her, there's a long way to go, right? So probably in the next 5 or 10 years, maybe we're going to reach there. Because in that case, you really need what we call the sensory information and gesture and facial expression, gaze, even body movement and body poses, anything.
Sure.
Yeah. So all this, depending really on the tasks and roles you want your AI assistant. And right now, I would say for operational, especially business operational reasons, the technology is already there. And just with the right technology, and the businesses can really deploy those AI assistants to scale their operations in many areas already.
How are we learning today that outcome, right? So if somebody comes in as a company and they're like, we're going to launch a chatbot, is there a system I guess I would speak to yours. Is there a system in there where they can see a human interaction, but yet mirror it with a chat interaction? And then when it goes off, it's like a QA testing. Is there a testing period? How do we actually get there? Because I still feel like anybody listening to this today, right? And maybe you can compare with what you guys are doing now and maybe what you're going to do in the future. But right now, I want a chatbot. In my head, I'm going to go and put an AI assistant on my website, or I'm going to put it in my app, or I'm going to put it somewhere. I'm going to sit down and think out, what are all the questions that people are going to ask, and how do I answer it? So I've got the FAQ side. I'm going to look at what's my process flow and how am I going to guide people through that. What is there that's more than that? And how is that taught? So somebody who's looking at, maybe they want to use your company or something. They're like, hey, we want to work with you right now to create this. What does that actually look like? Timeline and workflow to get something that's functionally working?
Great question. Actually, I just wrote a blog on this one. The factors, there are 4 factors that people should really consider when they are considering adopting a chatbot solution or AI assistant on their website. Because in the future, it's almost like every business right now must have a website, right? Sure. In the next couple of years, every website must be powered with a chatbot or conversational AI, because that's just gives you much more visibility, sure, much more relation build opportunity with your customers. So how should the business go about it, especially if they don't have the AI expertise or AI teams in-house, right? Very simple. So I have this slogan called U2C2, which means 2 U's and 2 C's. First U, because you want to adopt the AI assistant, you want to be useful. Useful, which means that it can complete the tasks that you want the assistant to accomplish. So how do you go about to do this one? If you are evaluating a chatbot company or AI platform, go to their website. Try their chatbots on the website. But if they don't even have a web chatbot on their website, that's a very big sign. Stay away from it, because they don't even have a guts to put on one, because this is their best show, right?
Yeah.
Then try it. See if you like that kind of a tone, you like kind of a conversation. If you like it, then second usability, which means it is then ask them, can I create this one on my own? Or I have this scenario, can you create it for me? Right? So this is basically to see, because after all, the AI assistant will be sitting on your website, represent your brand to interact with your customers.
Sure.
You want
Absolutely.
the best side of it, right? So you want to do that. That's why we call it, we want them to be empathetic, to be really feeling-based, to understanding your users. Third one, it is first the C, we could see too. First the C, it is cost, cost and speed to develop, and then ask, say this one, now I have this scenario, so can I do it myself? Because that's a cost factor, right? Or if I couldn't do myself, I have to use your platform. If you have to do it for me, how long will it take? How much will it cost? You don't want to go with let's say, for example, hundreds of thousands of dollars taking 18 months.
Yeah.
That's just not practical for many small businesses, right? So it's a cost and speed of development. Last C is collaborative, because AI is never perfect. It always needs to work with your existing workforce. How does this AI work with your existing workforce? Can it report problems? Like you said, how do I know if it's not working even? Can the AI actually actively real-time monitoring? I couldn't answer these questions. Cannot be surfaced to the human assistants? And also how fast for the human really collaborators to fix the problem, upgrade it, teaching that one. It's learning, right? Learning. So for example, we hold this bar very high. We want all this to be real time. So which means it is, let's say you go to talk to the chatbot, it's powered by us. If there's unanswered questions and detected immediately by the human can immediately actually submit the answer. And then all chatbots who are still chatting and without being taken offline to immediately learn that new actually knowledge. So that's
and also to learn what didn't work, right? It learns that like our answer didn't solve it because they asked the same question in a different way and things like that. So that's really, really interesting. So I like the 2 U's, 2 C's. That's really cool. I like the way that it kind of flows as well. For anybody who's listening, there's 2 parts to engaging with a company, right? There's that are beyond where we're at right now, right? And that's, what do I do to make the platform and the project successful? And so, and then the second one is, how do I know and measure if it's working successfully, right? So the first part, I'd love to get your idea, because I think a lot of people don't understand the mechanics and don't understand all of the moving parts, and they can be their own detriment. So if there's somebody who's thinking, I absolutely want to get into this and going with the same 2 U's, 2 C's, how do they approach it? Do they need to hire somebody that's dedicated? Do they need to like put together data? Like, how can they be successful in putting together their support for the 2 U's, 2 C's?
Great question. Actually, after answering you, I'm going to write another blog on this one. This is a great question. So first one, many customers, clients of ours have asked these questions too. So first one, just ask the business owner or the marketer, right? So think about it is, I need assistant. What I want this assistant to do. Mm-hmm. Almost like you hire, I'm giving an example about, let's say, your salesperson, right? So I teach you, let's say, an entry-level salesperson. What I want this entry-level salesperson do it is, when this person starting to talking to a potential customer, I wanted to prepare a set of questions to ask the salesperson, to ask the customers, right? So because you want to qualify the customers to say that, why are you interested in our product, sure, right? So what challenges have you faced in your own work, right? What solutions have you tried? So that's how you prepare. Second one, as if you prepare the salesperson, then thinking about it is, anticipate what type of questions the customers might ask, right? Customers might ask it is, so tell me about your product. What's the cost of your product? How long will it take it to ship it to me? Do I have any special discount if I buy more? So anticipate, right? Mm-hmm. Anticipate the questions. That's it. So as the owner of the business, if they're actually working with a platform like ours, they should really need to remember 2 things. What are main tasks this assistant, AI assistant needs to accomplish, right? What questions they need to ask your potential customers, and what questions they need to answer to the customers. That's it. So I want to go to your second question.
Sure. Yep.
How do you evaluate it? Very easy. So we're actually just doing this one right now with other customers. First one, there are absolutely several metrics, KPIs, if you remember. First one is the quality of the information you got. So for example, if your assistant really does what you wish to do, for example, do they give you the quality of information of the sales leads you have, right? Mm-hmm. Compare with whatever you had before on your website with the form, static form, with your even human salesperson. Second, does it answer the questions that your customers have? So we have this actually live dashboard to show you the percentage of the questions being answered. So our bar is, after 2 weeks, your AI assistant should answer fully automatically about, let's say, 75% of the customer questions without any human intervention, right? So that's why one. Third one, which is also very important, customer satisfaction. It's almost like you have a salesperson who is very capable, who actually complete all these goals, but really doesn't leave a good impression, mm-hmm, do a very good job for your brand, right? Yeah. So you want to measure the customer satisfaction, customer engagement, how long the customer, very similar to what they measure web engagement.
Sure.
How many people who actually chatted, actually browse the web, how long they stay, right? And how many people are converted, the conversion rate as well. And the people are, because we just actually helped another company does this using our chatbot, they said, I want to know how many people who chatted with my chatbot actually converted. Either they signed up for certain events or actually applied for their program, right? So that's it's KPIs. It's absolutely important for them to measure and to basically to compute the ROI, their investment and the return on investment on this particular AI assistant.
That's awesome. I know that we realized we were just playing around with Search Engine Journal when we launched our chatbot, because we were just curious, we were kind of playing with it a little bit. And I don't think we put a ton of effort into it. And we just got a bunch of people that would just start kind of cussing at us or yelling at us or just screwing with the chatbot. And that's kind of when we realized it wasn't really doing anything. And then we were like, maybe this isn't the best brand exposure for us to have something out there that people hate so much that they're, telling us, off in the chat. So we ended up kind of turning it off or making it very simple. But I do think a lot of people, they want to do well, but I think that a lot of people are swamped, and marketing, becomes that 100 different directions they have to go in, and they're trying to figure out how to do all that. They just know that somebody told them they need a virtual, an AI assistant on their website, and so they're putting it on there and they're hoping that it works. What do you think is a general time period and cost expectation people should have to not just throw something on their website, but to actually have something that they can benefit, and see sales from? Is it a 3-month or a 6-month cycle? Is it, something that's like a couple $1,000s a month, or is it, 5 figures a month? What is the range and the thoughts?
I would say it is be realistically. So using the current state-of-art technologies, maybe setting up just requires about a few days to a week. That's actually, people should keep in mind. If it takes longer than that, and then unless you have some special needs, normally for a typical business, but it requires a little bit adaptation, because you don't expect what people, and you will be very surprised as a business owner, once the chatbot can answer certain questions, and people actually have more questions, which is a good sign.
Sure, yeah, exactly.
So I would say expect a couple weeks to a month to actually gradually stabilize, which means that is you actually get to get it to the 75 or even to 80% of the one. Actually, that actually helps the employees, So because we working with our clients' employees have been much happier right now with this AI assistant, because they said, I hate to answer those repetitive questions.
Yeah.
To answer the same question, like literally, he said 1,000 times a year. I hate that, right? But now they answer once, and this chatbot can answer hundreds of thousands of times. So they feel very, very achieved, accomplished. That's a good sign actually to elevate actually the work environment atmosphere, workplace morale. So it's really about the couple of days to set it up, but it takes a month or so to really get used to, get accustomed to the customer base, right? But I wanted to mention that having an assistant is almost having a child at this stage. You cannot just ignore it. Almost like your website, very similar. Maybe that's why it's good analogies kind of works that. If your website always have a stale content, it's not good for your business. It's not good for your brand. So similarly, when you have an AI assistant, you want to refresh the knowledge of this assistant. So for example, once you have a new product, once you have a new campaign, you have a new announcement, it's great to teach the AI assistant as well, right? So because then they can actually help you more to tell your customers about new product, maybe even comparison a new product versus existing products. So we always also kind of share with our customers and clients, it is just remember your AI, just like your website, just like your kid, you wanted to continuously actually instill new knowledge and new content to it, more
for sure.
To it, right? So that's
even as times evolve, things change, right? The buying cycle, how people purchase, what's important to them, what influences them, what kind of information they want. That those things can really kind of need to be continuously taught. Yeah. So I think this is really amazing. I've really enjoyed kind of diving in. I think we've gone through some really fun parts to this. I want to ask you one more question, and then I want to ask you another kind of follow-up thing. But the one thing I'm interested in is you have a complete career in this space, right? So, I mean, you have a long career in AI. You're looking at it from a very current, practical standpoint for adoption, which I think is huge, right? I think that's a really, really positive thing. And I think it's going to help us get forward faster, because I think so many people are focused on like a very clinical or a very, I'm not clinical, that's not the right word, but very like experimental kind of like, can we, break certain records or get faster or do something else in our industry for the accomplishment versus like really focusing on the end user of this product and how do we evolve adaption, right? So that when we do have that product is useful to people. So I think that's a very commendable thing. And I don't think a lot of people are doing it. So I love that you're focusing on that. Where do you see this going in 2022, 2023? Like, what do you think is, not only just from what you're doing, but what do you think we'll see in that transition? What kind of interesting ideas do you expect to see in the next 2 to 3 years?
Great question again. So this is also the things I have been thinking every day as well, right? So what's also keep me and stay up at night. So one, it is very important and also near dear to my heart is this ethical AI topic. So what does it mean here? It is because especially like ours in Juji, our AI is very powerful now. It can really understand a person after maybe about 15, 20 minutes of a chat. Understand your, how the way you handle stresses, understand your passions and interests, right? So now next question it is, that's why we also keep saying responsible AI, ethical AI. Once you have that power, and we say that with great power comes with great responsibility. I truly, truly believe that, especially today. Because of that, you don't want the AI to take advantage of people. Because
I was just going to say that. What if they know
like
what if they know that they always buy more at, a late hour. And so they always send them impulse things and they take advantage of it. And yeah, exactly. I was thinking that same thing. Right. That's very interesting.
If I knew that somebody is an impulsive buyer, then I keep encouraging them to buy, encourage them to actually, and also if I knew somebody who is addicted to play games every day, every hour, then encourage them to have that addiction because it benefits some businesses, right? So this is a huge one coming up because in the meantime, I'm also the editor-in-chief for our academic journal, scientific journal called SEM Transactions and Interactive Intelligence Systems. So we just published an article about bridging the gap between ethics and practices. How should you instill this type of guidelines when you actually develop or deploy AI systems? I think there's a long way to go, but we have, as a community, we have already started talking about that, discussing about that.
Well, you added another question to my mind, and that's that right now across the world, we're looking at data privacy, right? More and more, you can't make the assumption that it's okay to use the data that you might have on somebody without their explicit permission, right? And their ability to say, I want you to erase this. Have you seen that start to play into this space at all?
Actually, let me revert to your question back to a little bit. So when the people actually ask opt-in, this is a one-year question, and then there's some people don't even ask you to opt-in, actually pry you on your privacy, right? Mm-hmm. So you can think about it is some of the, I would say, bad behaved chatbots. Especially, I have been in this area for a long time. I knew how people will behave with chatbots, with AI. People actually most of people are very kind. They will adapt to it. They will be themselves. They will reveal personal details. They will reveal. So in our case, in our case, actually, we put what we call the watermark in a chatbot. So even when any other companies, businesses using our AI assistant to elicit, let's say, potentially sensitive information like a social security number, our watermark will be automatically fired in a way to warn the user to say this may contain sensitive information, to make sure you only reveal such personal sensitive information to a party you trust.
Sure.
Right now, especially if every chatbot is on every website, that's could happen, right? So we trying to protect the businesses as well as to protect the users of the chatbot. Now going back to your saying opt-in information. So then once you do the opt-in information, so in our case, a big area we also share with our clients is be transparent, especially with that kind of intelligent cognitive our stuff. Sometimes it's harder for the people to realize, wow, this actually AI is not a human, right? So we want the business to be very transparent. Tell them this is not a real human, which is the set of expectation. But in the meantime, that transparency also helps. Do you really?
Yeah, that actually drives me nuts, because every time I call, which I've had to do a lot lately because of my internet issues with Comcast, they always say, "Let me check while I look at your record," and then all of a sudden I hear click, 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 click on a keyboard, and I'm like, you're trying to convince me that there's a real person here looking up your information. I was like, I don't know how I feel about that. The part of me in my, I'm like, obviously most people don't even notice that, but I immediately am like, not quite sure how I feel about the attempt to make me feel that you're real in this particular chat environment, right? In this engagement. So I'm probably super oversensitive to it just because I'm looking for it. But I absolutely find all of this fascinating. I can only guess that, myself included, I'm going to definitely want to continue reading what you're writing, what you're putting out, and learning more about your company. Can you just take a minute or two to tell me a little bit about Juji? Tell me a little bit about, the publications you have, where you're writing, how people can find you, how they can contact you.
Yeah, thank you. So finding us is easy. It's juji.io, juji.io. That's our website. And Juji really, mission of Juji is we really want to, what we call the augment humanity, advance humanity by unifying human and machine intelligence. That's our belief. So toward this goal, so that for the past 5.5 years now, so Juji has been working on 2 tasks. First task is to power AI assistants with what we call cognitive intelligence, right? In the form of a chatbots. If you have to use the word chatbots, it's in the form of right, conversational AI. So which means those agents, these AI assistants really can understand, can remember, can learn, and then they can be responsible and empathetic in their tasks. So that's the first task we're doing. So the second task that we're doing is, I also touched upon a little bit, is democratizing the adoption and the creation of such powerful agents. So businesses without any coding experience, without any AI expertise, can come to our website, sign up, and put in their, as I said earlier, your question is, put in their main task flow, workflow, put in their questions they want their chatbot answer to their customers. That's it. Then AI assistants will built-in cognitive intelligence will be automatically generated. So in the meantime, we also publish in the top scientific journals, called, mostly we publish ACM, which is the world's largest organization for computing professionals, or also practitioners in this area. So like Tokai, this is the transactions and human interaction, and various of large conferences like recommender systems, like also the what called intelligent user interaction conferences. So we publish there, and then our publications talking about it is how did you actually create AI? So 2 types of a publication. One is to publish on state-of-the-art technologies that we have developed.
Okay.
We share with people how we develop technology so many people can benefit. Second part of it is to really actually share with people users' experiences with those AI. So for example, do they trust those AI? If the AI has a different personas, how their trust, how human trust may change, right? And how the AI actually help the users accomplish certain tasks. So for example, one of the university is published research uses our AI to interview students.
Interesting. Yeah.
Teaming effort, right? So which means they can really predict which team can do well in real world. With the interview, they assess every team member's personality traits, interests, passion, and then figure out which team would do the best. Actually, it's really predicted with
that could be a really great, like, just job hiring in general. Like, I mean, how much you have to go through to take 300 resumes and like put them down. If you had a bot that could like send out an invite, and then they didn't have to talk, but they had to write out and interact, with that bot and answer questions, and they could read the resume and ask specific questions about specific things and get that information, and then come back and say, we think these are your 10 best candidates. That would be huge, in time saving for companies. So yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, we're using that for our own hiring, and also other clients have used it for their hiring as well. And also it's a very, and also this is helps because right now it's inclusion of diversity too, right? Mm-hmm. Because you don't look at the resume, you don't have these human biases. For example, you buy a certain school, you buy certain people you knew, you buy certain references. In this case, everybody has a very fair opportunity to chat with the AI. And AI really tries to elicit the information you want and figures out what their strengths are. In this case, you may actually find a person who is not the person you want to hire for this role, but you're not perfect for another role you have never thought of.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
Basically give yourself, the business, a chance, also give everybody a chance as well. So I grew up in China. I have this firm belief in Chinese saying that everyone is born with the talent. So we want to use AI to discover that talent, to maximize that talent.
Well, Dr. Zhou, I appreciate you joining us. I appreciate the information. I look forward to being able to chat with you again. I look forward to reading some of your work and checking out the product. Thank you so much for sharing with us. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Brent. It's been great.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Search Engine Journal Show. If you liked this episode, subscribe to our channel for so much more and click the notification bell so you don't miss a thing.